who may be watching. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Members, you're now aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on, and you know all that. There's a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded and that these recordings will be published on the Council's website. I will start by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your attendance. When I call your name, please unmute your microphone and confirm you're present. The first one I've got is Councillor Matt Maguire.
Present.
Councillor Peter Hudson.
Present.
Councillor Terry Rogers.
Present.
Councillor Sanderson.
Present.
John Williams.
Present.
And I am Mike Shellens as chair of the meeting. Democratic Services Manager, can you please report any apologies for absence?
Apologies for absence for Councillor Wells, but I don't have a substitute.
Right. Now, rushing on through the agenda, does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? I'm going to take silence as golden. And so we move on to the next item. Rob, you will keep me under strict control here, won't you, if I verge? We're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 30th of July as a correct record only. Can I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function on the right of your screen now? No, so I see no objections to that, to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record, so we will take that as carried. On the basis that committee members are happy to approve the minutes as written, again, I would ask, sorry, on that basis that the recommendation to approve the minutes is carried, I will sign a hard copy when we return to the office, whenever that may be. So I think we now go to the actions. We've got the actions listed under item 1A to J are from the last meeting in July and have been either completed or, with regard to the draft accounts, will be addressed in the final version of the accounts we're due to receive for the final approval and sign off at our special meeting on the 30th of October. If any members have any questions on the information contained in the action log, please use the raised hand function. Please note, due to its confidential business sensitive information, no further details can be disclosed on item 2 in this public meeting. Do I have any hands raised? No. Right. Therefore, the action log should be noted. Can we agree to note the minute action log?
Agreed.
Sorry?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you.
Agreed.
I understand that we have received no public questions or petitions by the appropriate deadlines on the reports included in the current agenda, so we will move to the next item of business. Debt management update. Please, can I check whom we have? It says whom we have to present the report. As I understand, Mr. Bates indicated that he might be delayed. And I know we also have Deborah Collins and also possibly Christine Favel from his team here. So who is going to speak, please?
I am present, Councillor.
You are present. You've taken all the fun out of it.
I am, but to take any questions, but very kindly, Deborah's going to run through the report because she's in the detail. Okay. And Christine's here to support.
Thank you. We await.
So Deborah Collins is here to present the report. I'm the Service Delivery Manager for LGSS Revenues and Benefits Service.
And I think you came to the last meeting and have foolishly come again this time.
Yes, I know.
We obviously
That's
didn't do
fun.
hard enough. Okay. We await you.
So the report was included with the pack, agenda pack. Do you just want me to run through it, or were there any particular areas that?
Just a quick run through, because
Yes, certainly. So
it has to be quick because Matt wants to be away in 22 minutes.
Okay, so if I go to the end of the report, which is the summary actions, so we predicted in June 19 now that a stable resourcing of the team, the debt team, and our improvement plan would put in place that would deliver an expected reduction in the overall outstanding debt for
Yes.
Cambridge County Council, and that has been achieved.
How much?
The amount is, bear with me 1 moment. So as of March 2019, we were reporting a 28.15 million overall debt. And as of the 1st of September, that has reduced to 21.38. There is a table at paragraph 2.2 showing it by quarters, because it is it's a peaks and troughs.
Yes.
One quarter will be slightly higher, then it will drop down just depending on the invoices that have been raised as new debt enters and old debt clears.
Right.
But overall, there has been an overall reduction in the amount outstanding.
Right.
The percentage of invoices cleared after 90 days for 2019 was 93% of the value, which we compared to a SIPFA benchmarking average of 87%. So
you've done better.
Yes, so we've exceeded the SIPFA benchmarking average. As I said, the overall comparison between March 2019 and September 20 shows an overall improvement of 6.77 million in the overall debt position. We undertake now debt profiling, and we report on this. And at 2.4 in the report, you can see that the overall debt position, excluding the Cambridge and Peterborough NHS CCG debt, was 14.82 million,
Right.
which 9.64 million is currently debt that's being worked by the debt team for it to move through recovery.
Right.
And then just finally, as work continues to improve, we're working closely with the service areas within Cambridgeshire County Council to improve procedures and processes so that in future we don't have the age debt issues that have occurred in the past. So it's working together with the service areas to make sure that they're monitoring their invoices better, invoicing promptly, making referrals when there might be any disputes, to ensure that we can keep this in a well-managed position.
Good.
So yes, that was the summary. Are there any questions?
Members?
Chairman, I did put my hand up while Deborah was speaking, but we've moved on a bit since then. I did press the blue hand thing. So it's Mike McGuire speaking.
Keep going, Matt. Yeah.
I just wanted to check something that Deborah said, but she has moved on a wee bit. I think, Deborah, you were saying, and I think it referred to the collection, the monthly collection, the rate by volume. And I think you said that by March of this year, we'd actually achieved something like the SIPFA average. I noticed that if you look at table on 2.1, the collection rates, that looking at the bottom there, collection rates by volume, it's actually dropped between February this year and March down to 87. So could you just clarify, was that what you were actually saying, where we were better than, I think the chairman said, oh, we're better than average, but is that not actual average?
That is the in-month collection rate. So for March 2020, the invoices raised in March 2020, we had 87% of them had been cleared, whereas invoices raised in February 2020, 91% had been cleared. So if you look back to the earlier raised invoices, you can see that there's a higher collection rate on those because we've worked that debt and worked it to resolution. Anything from March 20 onwards, we obviously were falling into the current COVID crisis, and we did suspend the issue of reminder notices during the period March to August. Beginning of August, we've just started them again. And so there has been a slight dip in collection over the last few months, just to reflect the circumstances that we're in at the moment. The automated letters are now all switched back on again, and we are resuming our normal business as usual recovery activities. But we did go through a period of 6 months, the last 6 months, where obviously we were mindful of the circumstances that people might find themselves in, particularly with a lot of the debt being adult social care debt. It's trying to be sensitive in how we approach the recovery. So we didn't undertake any proactive recovery, but obviously if customers were continuing to contact us during that period, we were resolving their issues, setting up payment plans, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Chairman. I assume that would be the case. I just wanted to just double check that I had understood it properly. Thank you.
Councillor Rogers, you're next.
A couple of questions, if I may, Chair. On January 20, there was quite a significant increase in the number of invoices issued, and that correlates in May 20 with...
Can you show me, can you give me a paragraph number, Terry, please?
I think about 2.1. I haven't written the paragraph number down, unfortunately, Chair. I do apologise.
Is it 2.11?
I think it was 2.11, yes.
Yes, it was. There was 8,720 invoices raised in January 20.
Yes.
The problem with debt is that we are very much in the hands of our service users. So we are driven by the amount of invoices that the service areas raise themselves. So there is often an increase in invoices towards the end of the financial year as some services make sure that they have raised all their income in the right financial year as we approach year end. So there can sometimes be a peak. I am aware that the adult social care team also changed some of their invoicing practices towards the end of last year, and I think they may have done a double invoice run to get themselves up to more less invoicing in arrears, so that might account for it. But I would have to look into more detail as to exactly what invoices they are, as to why there was a peak.
So what we're saying is that you are not responsible for the volumes that are necessarily issued in a particular time by a particular department.
Yeah, exactly.
But you just sit there and smile sweetly.
Yes, we just wait for them to arrive.
I think your response saying there was duplication is probably correct, because when you look at the figures prior to that, they're all averaging between 4 and 5.
Yes, there was something out of the ordinary, I suppose, would be a way that an exceptional billing plan or something. But as I say, I'd have to look into the background of the actual invoices to be able to give you a better answer on exactly why that peak was.
Would you be able to do that?
Yes, certainly, that's not a problem.
And could you then drop a note to all committee members?
Yeah, will do.
Thank you very much.
The second question, Chair, is very similar, but I think I know the answer myself. In May 20, which is in a further graph, there were a small number of invoices issued, and I presume that was due to the COVID problem.
Yes, I believe that was again down as a result of a change in adult social care billing in that month.
Yeah. My final question, Chair, is that...
You said you only had 2.
Well, give me 3. Why are NHS and LGS law responsibility of the council finance team rather than the debt recovery team? And what feedback do you get from that particular team?
Does Tom want to make a comment there?
Yeah, we'll do. So LGSS law, we're almost back into a business as usual position now. So that we shouldn't really be in a position where there is very much debt at all going forward, because their cash flow is stabilised, and that will hand back to the debt management team in case there were any issues arising. On the NHS CCG, it's important to emphasise first of all that the vast majority of our NHS debt is collected as normal. So they're large contributions to the Learning Disability Partnership, Better Care Fund, and actually during the pandemic has all worked as expected, and they've paid on time. Where we have more difficulty is on client-based debt. So whether it's a joint NHS contribution, either through joint funding or for mental health clients, or previously, it doesn't happen anymore, but we used to be jointly funded for funded nursing care. For a variety of reasons, due to the nature of that debt, because it emerges from a social care assessment, and then issues relating to capacity at the CCG, and then how that interacted with the council's finance system, particularly at the point that ERP was implemented, and some amounts were matched to the wrong invoices. It has needed a further degree of analysis by my team in order to progress that reconciliation and understand what the position is, and then handle that kind of politically with the CCG in terms of negotiating and progressing through that debt together, the key partner of ours, of course. We're now in a much better position in terms of understanding that level of debt, so we've completed that reconciliation, and there are some further actions now to actually take that forward and chase down the remaining amounts. The NHS have continued to pay for individual clients throughout all of that. It's just been the complexity of the data and those kind of partnership relationships are the reason that we've handled it within the finance team rather than as sort of normal debt recovery.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom.
So going back to Deborah on that, if I may, what difference is that going to make to your totals going forward?
So at the moment, there is an amount of 6.5 million CCG debt, which once resolved will obviously come off of the total. So what we'll then report on is debt that is within the debt team's control. So we tend to focus just on the amount that is managed by us. So as a debt team, it won't make an awful lot of difference to us because we'll still be just looking at the same debt that we have had in the past. But it would mean that the overall figure would reduce from 21 million to 14 million. And so obviously look a lot healthier on a bottom line figure.
When might that happen? I ask either of you.
I'll defer to Tom on that.
Well, I think we're continuing to progress it. So there's further detail in the appendix. It's Appendix A that breaks down the different types of debt within that figure. The largest sum, funded nursing care, as I say, that isn't funded by the CCG anymore, so that will be gradually reduced to zero. Realistically, thinking about capacity, particularly at the CCG at the moment, I think that is at least 6 months further work until we've got that to completely zero. To some extent, some of the joint funding for clients, that will always be an issue that needs to be monitored quite closely. And I think that's all I can say on that, really.
So what would the year-end figure look like? How much of this mess, well, how much of this accumulated debt might have disappeared by then?
Well, we've collected 1.9 million against these sort of totals in the last year. I'd expect, given that we've reconciled further, I'd expect that to speed up really, and we'd be, I think, aiming to have those backdated amounts down to below 3 million. But there are obviously contingencies on both sides to making sure that happens.
We live in extraordinary times, so I will not take you to the House of Lords if we're awry, but I just want to know what our aspirations and realistic expectations are. Okay. Mr. Hudson, Councillor Hudson has had his hand aloft for ages and must be getting pins and needles in his arm.
That's putting it politely, Chair. Thank you. I was going to delve into the CCG debt and finances, but Tom's very successfully taken the wind out of my sails and carefully replaced the safety catch on my missile launcher. So thanks for that, Tom. And you also, Chair, have asked questions I was going to ask for me. So I'm very grateful. So I had time more time to drink my coffee. The only thing I will say about the CCG, the funding nursing care, goes back to 2017-18. It may not be funded by the CCG now, but it was then. It's a debt we should be collecting. And overall, perhaps a question Tom could answer. The CCG is 133 million pounds in debt at the moment. Cumulative debt, CCG, 133 million. Where do we come to pecking order to get our money?
I think that's you, Mr. Kelly.
Well, I welcome Councillor Hudson's question. I think it is fair to say that the CCG has got a number of it had a number of financial challenges before we reached the pandemic, and indeed they've needed to redeploy resources subsequent to that. And I know they've worked with another council very successfully on reducing their level of debt from a much higher point. So I'd be confident that we can do that with them too. Councillor Hudson is absolutely correct to say that it is money that the council has already paid out to care homes in the case of funded nursing care, and we do need to recover that from the CCG. So we will be doing that, and it's in many ways on nursing care. There's a very clear paper trail about what nursing needs are, what a nursing placement is, and that there is an entitlement to funding nursing care. So there's not much in dispute really. It's an administrative process to match that up between partners and to ensure that payments are delivered.
Any other member got any further questions? Right, well, I must confess to have been disturbed while you were speaking, Deborah, trying desperately to get my screens to reflect what we were supposed to be talking about. So you may have covered this, but I've got paragraph 2.2, movement in overall debt. I've got a table from since March 2019, and I actually don't understand it. Can you just walk me through what the implications are of the dates down the left-hand side? I can understand the y-axis, but the x-axis bothers me at the moment.
So the dates down the side are the as at dates. So as at the 1st of March, the overall debt was 28.15 million. As at the 1st of October, it was 16.93. So it's a snapshot date of the debt position on that date.
Right.
So the next table at 2.3.
Stick with that one for the moment.
Yeah,
so if I look at 2.2 and I look at the 1st of January 2000, 1 to 30 days is 12 million, and that's a significantly higher figure than the 1st of October. But I don't see that as working its way through into April.
So on the 1st of January, there were some large value invoices. I would suspect it was a CCG invoice.
I think we had
outstanding
last time on those invoices, yes.
So on the 1st of January, that invoice was 1 to 30 days overdue. By the 1st of April, it had been cleared, so it no longer appeared in the next line down. So the next line down is looking at the 1st of April, is looking at those invoices that were still outstanding on the 1st of April. So they were new. So the 1 to 30 days there would be invoices that had been raised in the month before, in March 20, whereas the 1 to 30 days at the 1st of January would be invoices that had been raised in December 19.
Right. He said.
Yeah, I haven't convinced you with that, have I?
No. Because I would be expecting a sort of, if I use my hands, I would be expecting a wave pattern to come through the figures, that a huge lump here means that next time we report those figures, there would be an increase, and a tiddly figure here would mean that next time, in the next time interval, that would be reflected. But I spot at 1st of April 366 to 730, we suddenly leap to 5.4 from having 2.6 the time before.
So the within the
now I recognise there are different time intervals.
Yeah, so the 366 to 730, some of that 5.4 will be some of the 5.53 from January, but will also be an element of the 2.6 that has just tipped into 365. So it's not the same debt each month. It is a rolling thing. So invoices will get cleared so that they'll fall out, but then new invoices will get older so that they'll move in.
Right. Okay. And over 730, we've got at 1st of September, we've got 4.5 million.
Yeah.
How much of that is realistic? I mean, if it's over 2 years, are we really get it?
We are, when we're looking at these figures, we still have the CCG debt in here. So that older CCG debt that we were referring to has, if you have a look, it's tipped from 366 to 730. It's moved into the over 730. So I would anticipate that we will get an element of that because, as I say, it is the CCG debt that is inflating that figure, that it's moved into being over 2 years old.
Right. Well, I think this is something we'll want to look at again.
Yeah.
And when we reduce the over 730 figures, to what extent and to what extent is this populated in the other columns? Are write-offs in here?
So the these are taking account of invoices that have been written off. So we talk of invoices being cleared rather than paid. So some of them will have been paid, but some of them may have been written off as well. So they're no longer outstanding. They've been settled either by payment or by a decision to write off. Right.
But you're reckoning at this stage, and this is being recorded, so careful what you say, over 730, 4.59 million, we should get a fair whack of that back because we've written off all the bits that are hopeless.
Yeah, I would anticipate that we would. If I can just take you to the next table at 2.3.
Hang on.
And that would hopefully demonstrate it a bit better. So this is an analysis of the debt that was outstanding on the 1st of March 2019. So we've just ring-fenced that debt and tracked it up to the 1st of September. So as of the 1st of March, there was 35.53 million outstanding.
And that reduces to 7 million. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that shows the movement. And if you look at the over 730, that's come down from 1.77 to 0.73. So some of that will have been paid. Some of it will have been considered to be unrecoverable, and therefore have written off. But that sort of shows the CCG debt does tend to cloud, perhaps is the best word I can think of, the movement of the debt. But I think that table just demonstrates that it does, that you can see that over time, the older debt does get cleared.
Right.
May I just add a little bit more context? So with the over 733 days old, of that currently, of that figure, the 4 point, I've lost it now, that you spoke about earlier, capital shellings, of that 2.6 million is CCG, Cambridge at the moment.
Right. And am I right in thinking that we have some debts where there are very long-term repayment plans?
There are, yes. So there are...
and that could well be in some of these figures.
Yes, debts that are secured on a property.
Yes.
and also, as you say, payment plans as well, ongoing payment plans.
Right. Members, are we content to let these good people go, or have we got further questions for them?
Councillor Shellens, there was a question that was in the notes of the minute. I just wanted clarification as to when does Q4 end and when we would be expecting to receive a report on that.
Yes.
So Q4 ends on the 31st of March at the end of the financial year, and we would anticipate that we would be in a position to report on that probably about the middle of May, to take account of preparing committee papers, etc. I don't know what the schedule of meetings is for next year, but around about May time, then I think that would be when we would be able to present the next report, if that was acceptable to the committee.
Well, I have to say that I'm looking at recommendation B now. We do seem to be getting a sort of cow in labour noise
I'm very sorry, that's me. I've got people in the back garden cutting down trees.
Oh, right.
So I do apologise.
Well, don't tell them that I thought they sounded like a cow in labour, because I don't think that would help. We're asked to note, and I'm sure we'll do that. I view this debt situation as quite important, and I'd quite like another report in 3 months. And the other problem is that Q4, I might well be a thing of the past by then, because that's post what is scheduled for the elections. Whether or not the elections will take place or not, I don't know. So I would like another report in 3 months' time, if that's not going to put too much bother on you. And
Yes.
even if it is going to put too much bother on you, actually.
So that would be in December,
Yeah.
to come back to committee in December. So
Rob, have we got a meeting around then?
I was just going to intervene and say we actually have a meeting in January, and at the moment we do have it down in the forward plan for a 6-month update on the debt collection service. So I think January would be the date.
yeah.
Seems sensible.
Okay, Robin, are you happy about that?
I'm happy about that. I'm not sure it will be us doing it then, but we're happy to come back in January for a final meeting. I think it's fair to say.
That's
So
lovely.
yes, we'll see you in January.
Smashing. Mr. Sanderson, you had your hand up, and I had Councillor Sanderson with his hand up. Tom, has that come down?
Sorry, Chairman, I don't think I put my hand up at
All
all.
right, I must be mixing up my Sandersons.
That's all right, don't worry. The
Right,
other one,
sorry about
Cousin
that.
Rob. Cousin
Right,
Rob.
okay.
Just to explain, I'm done, because that was what I was going to intervene with about the January meeting.
Lovely.
So.
Okay, so the recommendations for this item are to note the actions and approach being taken to manage income collection and debt recovery. That's A. I see no difficulty with that. Agree that a further update will be provided on the position at the end of, and then we've got Q4, which we're now going to rewrite to Q2, I imagine.
Depending on when in January it will be, it could either be the position at the end of November or possibly the position at the end of December, depending on when the papers would be needed. But
okay, that's
more likely the end of November.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Papers, I could say papers are due approximately 13th of January, because the meeting is on the 26th of January.
Okay, we will endeavour to do the 31st of December, but if not, it will be the as at 30th of November. But we'll try and get to be as up to date as possible.
Good, thank you very much indeed. Robin, before I close this item down, have you anything you want to say?
No, Deborah's done a sterling job. Thank you very much, Deborah.
I certainly agree with that. I think you've been a masterpiece of silence. So,
thank you.
Well done.
I did struggle at times, as you know. I do struggle to stay silent, but yeah, thank you.
Right. I may need to chat to you outside the formal meetings.
Absolutely fine. Always a pleasure.
Good. Okay, item 1. This item done as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much, Debt Team.
Thank you all.
Which takes us, I think, to the second report, which is internal audit. And I suspect that that is going to be Mr. Wilkinson.
Indeed it is, Chair. Thank you.
Are you better for your holiday?
Yes, thank you. It feels a lifetime ago, even though this is only my second day back. It still feels like it was about 6 months ago I was on leave. It's surprising how quickly you fall back into the groove.
And how much has your beard grown on holiday?
Well, you know, I've been feeding it extensively with beer, my wife tells me.
Good. Go on.
So the report presented to you today provides the committee with an overview of the audit work we've been doing so far this year. We are also drafting, we've got a good draft version of it that we've been speaking to Chris Mallion and Gillian about. We're drafting an audit plan for the remainder of the financial year because the second half of the year is an important period where my service will need to complete all of its audits of key financial systems. And of course, that work is going to include the operation of those key financial controls throughout the period where COVID-19 pressures have been applied and indeed still do apply. Consistent with our business continuity plans, when the COVID lockdown came into play, we suspended the audit plan and we had discussions with the 151 officer and the chief executive about where to focus internal audit resource. And indeed whether to redeploy.
When did you mention that to this committee?
I think I wrote to the committee in March. I think I wrote to yourself, Chair, in March explaining that we were instigating the business continuity plan.
Right, thank you.
Whilst we have been not doing audit planned work, we have still been engaged in some significant areas of work. And this report gives you as a committee a summary of where we have been focusing our attention. It's really been a different approach we've adopted to our audit work, albeit not replacing those planned audits. It's been a different area of focus that we've been looking at.
Duncan,
so
I hesitate to do this, but I've got a hand from Councillor Hudson.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm a bit early with my hand. Sorry.
Right.
Go on. Sorry.
Go on. Right. Duncan, sorry to cut you up again.
I really just wanted to highlight a couple of the areas to give you a flavour as a committee that where we've been focusing our audit work to give assurance into the council. So, for example, one of the early things that we did agree with the 151 is that the audit team would undertake a daily review of financial transactions as they flow through ERP. So rather than doing payroll checks and creditors invoicing audits throughout the year, since April, we've been looking at ERP and the financial transactions that flow through ERP on a daily basis. And that work was focused on confirming that both the proper operation of controls was still being applied and also looking to some extent at the legitimacy of the spend that we're observing flowing through the system. Because you may all remember back in March and April, there was a significant amount of uncertainty and unknown arising around COVID financial transactions and payments. At borough councils and unitary councils, we had significant issues about making business support grant payments to businesses, and there was a lot of money flowing through the public sector at that time. So not only were we verifying that the controls were operating correctly, we're also looking to some extent at the legitimacy of the spend. And that gives us assurance in all those areas, and it is positive assurance I want to report to the committee that those controls have been operating robustly, and we've not really found any issues giving us concern of the spend flowing through the accounts at that point. We have raised a number of queries with Tom Kelly, the Deputy 151, and jointly we've worked through those queries in order to look at what that spend was for and its legitimacy within the COVID environment. And those processes gave us a number of particular assurances. So we've been looking at all of those finances as they've flowed through the council. And that's a very significant resource that we've been applying over the past 6 months to that.
Duncan,
Other example. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry. What you've said, if I paraphrase, is that you've looked at serious issues around the money that was flowing through the balances in the COVID situation, which was new to all of us. And you found, without many exceptions, it to be good in terms of control. Is that your experience, without asking you to name any names, is that your experience in the other councils with which you have dealings?
We've adopted similar approaches for other councils in looking at daily transactional analysis flowing through finance systems. I think it's fair to say we've not found any significant issues at any of the councils. Nothing that would come anywhere close to materiality threshold or a significant fraud or anything like that. Certainly not internally from the council. We have clearly had to be very live for the borough and unitary councils processing business support grant payments into businesses. That particular area had a time pressure applied to it. That increased a risk profile for us around attempted external fraud on those processes. And clearly I can't comment, but that for those councils, but that didn't apply to Cambridgeshire. That wasn't an area of testing that we needed to do because Cambridgeshire weren't processing that volume of transaction. And comparing them to others, I think it's fair to say that in one or two councils we had quite a few more queries that we were seeing of transactions where certain services across those councils weren't quite recognising the COVID situation and the need to apply proper control and indeed to curtail some non-essential spend. We had one council that they didn't invoke a 114. If colleagues are aware of what that is, it's when the finance director essentially says all payments must be approved by them. But they were close to that in saying that they only wanted to see essential spend, non-essential spend needed to go through the 151 officer or the finance team. And we had a significantly greater number of conversations with that council about spend we were observing going through the system that was not essential spend and didn't meet the criteria the 151 officer had set. So I think Cambridgeshire compares favourably in our area of testing in that we didn't encounter any of those difficult conversations that we needed with services about inappropriate spend at all. We didn't see any significant feedback on that.
Good. I'm pleased to hear that response, because a concern I had was that if you never found nothing, it would suggest that you weren't looking hard enough. And what you're saying is that there are differences between councils, and that gives me a degree of comfort, which I find reassuring. Thank you.
One of the other areas we also looked at that I wanted to highlight to you as a particular area of focus, whether the committee is aware, but national procurement policy guidance was quite a forceful issue through March and onwards, particularly in relation to the public sector being asked to maintain contract payments, even if that contract work was being suspended. So in simple terms, if the council was not receiving the service, procurement policy guidance was asking the council to consider continuing those payments in order to avoid immediate large-scale redundancies across private sector contractors supporting the council. So that was quite, from an audit perspective for me, that was a very challenging piece of guidance around the council paying for things that it may not necessarily have been receiving. So we've worked very closely, again, with finance colleagues to ensure that that procurement policy guidance was being applied properly across the council. And again, I give positive feedback that we found that was the case when we were looking at those payments, that contract manager officers were applying that policy guidance proportionately and appropriately. With appropriate controls in place. So again, a good amount of work there for my team to be reviewing individual contracts and the terms around those and giving positive assurance to the committee and the council regarding robust controls applied to some significant financial payments for the council in a high volatile period. In addition to that kind of routine work, and the report at section 3 does list other areas of recurring work we were doing in order to provide assurance into the council. We also undertook several project-based assignments. We've outlined quite a few of those in section 4 of the report, also to give the committee a flavour that we've also responded to those requests from services during the last 6 months, where they have asked for certain assistance during that highly volatile period. So where services have asked for that, we have stepped in and we've provided some project support to them on an assurance and control environment. And really sections 3 and 4 set out where we have applied the audit resource throughout this period to show that we've been prioritising the needs of the council in a period of high pressure, high volatility, and we have largely found positive assurance into the council that the council's controls have been operating effectively during that period. So it should give you the assurance as a committee that whilst we suspended the originally drafted audit plan, we've still been heavily engaged in applying audit resource to meet the needs of the council and to give assurance or support controls across the council in an unprecedentedly volatile period for the council. Certainly in 30 years of audit experience, I've never experienced that kind of pressures from different environments for the council as a first responder to really be engaged in. So very positive assurance, I think, to date. Of course, I have to put the usual audit caveat on that we audit financial years. And I started this by talking about we need to start thinking about a planned series of audits on the key financial systems in the second half of the year, because actually the pressures on the internal audit team are a lagging resource, whereas frontline services have obviously been dealing with the COVID pressures for the past 6 months. The pressures on me and my team are very much lagging in the sense of the second half of the year is really where I need to audit the operation of those controls across the entire year. And that presents a number of challenges for me in auditing those systems when they've operated during that period of volatility, so that I can give an annual opinion at the end of the year. So we're expecting a very busy second 6 months for the audit service in dealing with those. And also, just to complete the picture, we've been very live to the fact that all of those pressures have a reasonable impact on the risk environment and the risk profile of the council in a period of high volatility and high pressure and high change. You always see an increased risk profile appear. And Annex B to the report gives a précis of the fraud issues that we've been looking at through to August. And again, that gives quite a positive picture that we've not really seen any indication of significant fraud or significant volumes of fraud appearing in the last 6 months, and we have been watching for it. So we've been looking for it, and we've not really seen that increase. That's a bit of a hostage to fortune sentence in that we need to keep vigilant around those issues. But to date, it's all pretty much reassuring into the committee that the audit team has had to significantly change its focus, has done that, has been very fleet of foot, has reacted to the pressures and priorities that the council has needed us to look at in this period. And all of that work has pretty much provided positive assurance to the council regarding the operation of controls during this unprecedented period. And with that lengthy introduction, because I think I needed to work through that to give the committee those assurances as to how we've based some of those initial assurances, I'm happy therefore to answer any questions at that point.
Well, Councillor Maguire was the first to get his hand up there.
Thank you, Chairman. Just unmuting me mic there. So thank you, Duncan, for, as you said, that was fairly detailed and quite lengthy. But I just want to take you back to something. Well, there's two questions. One about something you've reported, and the other one is about one of the appendixes, which is the fraud business. But on the, I think it comes under the paragraph supplier relief, where you were saying about local authorities were encouraged to continue to pay contractors, even though we may not have been getting the work done for whatever reason. I can understand the philosophy of that. But were the Cabinet Office, the Treasury, prepared to underwrite that? So in other words, if we continue to pay, but nevertheless, a contractor, for whatever reason, wound up or something, you know, and I'm thinking maybe waste contracts, highways contracts or something like that, would we would have paid money and yet not got the service? So is it underwritten, or is that pie in the sky? First question.
I don't think underwritten is the correct phrase. My interpretation, and I'd certainly welcome if Tom wants to come in on this from his understanding, but my understanding of the rules and the government support to that does not include any additional funding into the council. The view being taken was the council would have been contracted to make those payments anyway, so it would have no negative impact on your budget. And in that respect, you're just making payments for which you've not received a service. So the financial impact should be nil. If we'd not had COVID, we'd have still made those payments, we'd have just got the service. So with COVID, we've made the payments and not received the service. So no underwriting or further monies would I expect to be coming across for the government for those issues.
But what would happen if the contractor went bust?
Come in there, Chairman. I mean, that was partly the point of my question. I can understand the point that Duncan's making, Chairman, if I can interrupt you. But if we didn't get the service, we might very well have had to go out again to another contractor to get that service, which would have been an additional cost. That was the point I was kind of making. I don't know if that's any clearer.
I'm not sure exactly what aspects of the route into government we would go to request additional payment. I know there are various abilities to go in and submit to government additional costs incurred that we would want to be centrally funded. So I certainly don't think that in the case of a contractor going bust, we would be prohibited from requesting central government support for the additional costs incurred. I'm thinking here in particular around the leisure sector, where the leisure sector has always worked on a very fine margin of profitability where it has been outsourced. And in that respect, my knowledge as an auditor is that those suppliers in that particular sector have been very hard hit by lockdown. I'm aware of at least one of my councils talking to one supplier about additional support that we have put to that supplier that they may well look to the government to help fund. I just don't think it's underwritten is my answer. I don't think, unlike the business support grants that went through unitaries and boroughs, where the government were very clear that was monies from them that they were expecting councils to passport through to businesses. So the councils would be recompensed for those. Other additional costs incurred, I'm not aware for that area of example that the government has guaranteed or underwritten those additional costs. But I think, you know, a pitch could be made that may be successful or maybe not, because I would imagine the government have got enough calls on their finances to think twice about it.
Yeah. Anyway, Chairman, can I just come in with my second question? I appreciate it was a bit.
Go ahead.
Okay. It actually refers to Annex B, which we didn't really cover, Duncan, but that's not a complaint. And that's about fraud performance. And I notice in table 1, a rather peculiar one, and it may be that my question's out of order, but it talks about a school where I'll read the outcomes. One matter investigated for check alteration from 1,107 to 4,107 and payable to an unknown and unconnected individual. Anyway, the bank, where the loss was recovered from the bank.
Correct.
But no mention is made of how the fraud occurred and what action was taken against the person committing the fraud. Would we get that information? Let's say the bank had decided, no, it's not down to us, mate, you hadn't got your controls in place. What action gets taken against the fraudulent, the committer of the fraud?
So my understanding for that particular case that it was not a Cambridgeshire employee. If it was a Cambridgeshire employee that we suspected had been involved or committed the fraud, then you would receive information around the action we would take, because clearly there would be disciplinary action that we would expect to take in addition to any criminal processes. In this case, my understanding is it's not connected to any employee of the council, and therefore us reporting to you that it's gone through local police and action fraud, that's the appropriate route in order to pursue the criminal aspects of it, given the bank have acknowledged that actually they shouldn't have honoured the cheque that was intercepted and then amended. So if it's council employee, then clearly we'd give you that specific information. When we're silent on it, I'm afraid we assume that if we're silent on it, you will realise that it's not an employee, and perhaps we need to be a little bit more explicit about that. But in this case, it wasn't an employee, so therefore solution of that issue is through the police and action fraud in order to take criminal issues forward.
Thank you, Chairman.
If I can just intercede here, whilst we're on the question of fraud, my question was that, Duncan, you said that levels are admirably modest, but I know that we've got 12 cases reported, and that's a higher figure than I recall in my time here. Are they, is there an upsurge or isn't there?
I certainly don't view that level as an upsurge. I certainly reviewed that. I think you used the word modest. For a large county council, that appears to me to be a relatively modest schedule, and particularly none of them are, I have to be careful how I word this, but none of them involve significant values or material values as such. In that case.
Okay, accepting that, but moving on to an ancillary, I noticed that for a couple of blue badge cases, we've got court action, and that does seem to me to be sledgehammers and peanuts, but I'm interested in your views.
Blue badge fraud is something that the national anti-fraud networks highlight as a particular priority, as they have done for the past year or two, in the sense of a society impact that they are for vulnerable people, and therefore the abuse of that scheme is a particularly sensitive issue. In respect of those, they are, I have two types of fraud, if I word it that way. I have internal fraud that I get more worried about, as in staff or managers from within the council attempting fraud against the council. Those are the issues that would undermine systems of control and governance that I would think have more significant issues. The secondary category of external fraud attempted on the council is one that is almost an accepted level. As a large public body, we are always going to get people attempt fraud in respect of those services and financial support that we deliver to people. It's almost inevitable for a blue badge process that we are going to have ineligible people who attempt to abuse the system. So in that respect, it is a lower category for me, but for the former reasons, as I've outlined, some of those cases become quite clear-cut that they are a criminal defrauding issue, and therefore in those circumstances the council's policies apply, and we then recommend into the monitoring officer and the 151 officer in those cases that matters should be referred to the police or prosecution take place under the council powers. They are normally undertaken through action fraud or the police. So the decision to prosecute is not normally ours. The decision to prosecute is normally a third party's. We refer the matter to the police or action fraud, and they take the decision that they feel there's sufficient evidence in order to prosecute, which I don't know for those cases in particular, but that's what I would imagine is the case for those two.
Right. I'm going to imagine that Councillor Maguire is going to put his hand down fairly soon, and therefore go to Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to refer, please, to the audit plan on page Annex A on page 49 and 50. Looking at just a couple of observations and questions, frustrated questions, I suppose. The County Farms review of proposed process and procedures. I mean, if they're proposed, they're already on the table, and this seems to be going on forever. And I would really like it to come to committee as soon as possible, so we could actually look at what has been and what is going on and what is proposed for our county farm estate, which is really important for this authority. My second observation and probably question, I was looking for a particular farm by name and I couldn't see Manor Farm, and then I saw County Farm Referral. Do I assume that is Manor Farm? This reported investigation has been going on. I can't remember it not going on. This committee's been expecting it for such a long time, and I really want to know why we haven't seen it and when we're going to see it, please. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I deal with the second question first, yes, the County Farm Referral text is the Manor Farm case that is still ongoing. It's a difficult answer I have to give the committee, but the matter is now subject to various detailed legal advice, and as the Council's Chief Internal Auditor, I have to take that advice and I have to abide by that advice. I can update the committee that the draft audit report, the audit work is largely done, and we're into the process of fact-checking. So the draft audit report was provided to those concerned for accuracy checking on the 17th of August. Consistent with some revised timelines we agreed with key stakeholders, we received the last of the submissions in response to that draft late yesterday. And we're now working through those responses urgently. I've given a number of assurances, particularly to Gillian Beasley, the Chief Executive, that as and when there is work for the audit team to progress the matter, resources are then applied to the matter. So my audit resources are prioritising that at the very top of their list to work through the responses provided. So I can give the committee the reassurance that the matter is progressing, albeit I must have proper regard to the legal advice. For that reason, I'm afraid I'm unable to give any more information on timelines except that I've just outlined.
Thank you, Chair. If I could come back, please. Thank you, Duncan. That's very much appreciated. I take it this is not sub judice, is it?
I don't know if Fiona McMillan's still on this, who would want to come in on there. I would just highlight that the issue is subject to legal exchanges at the moment, and in that respect,
yeah, I understand that now. Yeah.
When the lawyers are giving advice on next steps or audit process, I have to abide by that. And one of those things I have to abide by is the legal advice on confidentiality and what I can and cannot say in a public environment. And that's what I'm adhering to now.
That's fine, thank you.
If I can say, Peter, that I'm as frustrated or possibly even more frustrated than you, because as we come up to every meeting, I think, well, at last I'm going to find out something. And Duncan, never ever play poker with him, because I ain't got nothing, and I've been pressing Duncan for probably 18 months now, because it's just gone on and on and on, and I'm still no wiser.
I don't want to say, Chair and committee members, I don't want to describe myself as frustrated in this process. I would just give the reassurance to the committee that from day one of this, we always recognised this was a particularly sensitive issue that we were looking at. That's not giving any indication of outcome, any indication of audit opinion. We just always knew from the very first instant we thought that was coming towards audit, that it was going to be a very sensitive issue and would need to be prioritised. Now, we have constantly applied those principles to this, and at times those principles come into tension with one another regarding prioritising it quickly and reflecting properly some of the sensitivities involved in it and working through it properly. And in those respects, it has been a frustrating process, but actually it's something that's got to be done properly, which is of course why we at times have to take legal advice and follow that legal advice when it's given.
Two things. First of all, Duncan started that contribution by saying he didn't want to say he was frustrated. I certainly am. And secondly, I really do hope that this will get finalised before I leave this post.
Me too, sir. Me too.
Because handing it over to somebody else would be a nightmare. I have Councillor Rogers.
Chair, this is perhaps a question not only for yourself, but also to Duncan and perhaps to a degree Tom, and in the case Fiona as well. It's a general question. As a committee, at the moment, we're restricted to those particular agenda items that are pertinent and I would say local and relevant to the time we're facing. As such, there are important issues in my mind that we're not addressing. For example, we've been given data as regards consultants report. We've been given data as regards transformation fund. We've been given data in the past as regards whistleblowing, all of which in a normal day-to-day routine, we'll be receiving reports, reading them, commenting on them, and passing back any instructions or directions. We're not doing that at the moment. Looking at today's forecast through what the Prime Minister is going to say this evening, or perhaps already addressed Parliament, things are not going to change that quickly. So are we stuck in this rut of only dealing with those important issues, or are we now, having realised we're within this situation, we can branch out a little, and perhaps we should direct this question to the Chief Executive?
Well, I think I'll have first dibs at this. My understanding is that matters that come to this committee are currently being restricted to those items where a decision is required. So matters that are for notification and for comment by members, but do not require a decision to be made, can be dealt with by members contacting officers directly. Rob, could you comment on that?
Yes, I mean, this is the decision of group leaders. So, I mean, that is the decision of group leaders at the moment, is that we shouldn't be taking information reports.
Can I come back, Rob, if I may? At the moment, this decision was made 6 months ago.
It was reaffirmed recently, though. It may change. I think there's a meeting. Yeah, group leaders do meet regularly.
But as members, we're not consulted. I don't think my group has consulted this, but perhaps Councillor Hudson and Councillor Maguire correct me. I can't remember any consultation on this in group, can you? I can see nodding or shaking of heads. So I think that's perhaps something I should approach the group leader on, but I hear what you're saying, Rob, on that. And I do, as you know, express opinion at times, but it doesn't get anywhere because I'm a single person shouting against the wind. Sorry, Chairman.
I'd be interested to see how you minute that comment, Rob.
Welcome to my world, Terry.
Thank you, Peter. I'll shut up now, Chair.
Always pleased to hear your contributions, Terry. Councillor Rogers has still got his hand up. Councillor Maguire, do you still want to come back?
Hang on. Yes, Chairman, I do. I put my hand up. I took it down after you commented previously. I'll put it back up again for another reason.
What a busy afternoon.
Yes, it is. But I'm going to take, if I can, Duncan, back to the point that Councillor Hudson was making with regards to the farms. While we were talking, I've been busy searching through my agenda papers. I'm sure I saw in something in amongst our papers for today reference to Manor Farm, specifically made reference to Manor Farm, but I haven't been able to find it in the normal agenda papers. So it could have been one of the things, either the letter from BDO or something like that, or the response from BDO to, I think it was your letter, Chairman. But definitely it was specifically mentioned in some of the things I've been reading in the last couple of days. But that's just a comment. I'm not looking for an answer to that, but I definitely saw a reference to it because it made me wonder as a result of seeing that. But just a comment, Chairman.
Mr. Sanderson.
I suspect that may have been the forward agenda plan itself, which has them at the end. It's on the very last page of the agenda.
Mrs. Macmillan.
Thanks, Chairman. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Rogers' comment on the information items only or not coming to committee, that's part of the virtual meeting protocol, which was agreed by group leaders and back in March, April time, and then it was reviewed after full council in July. So if there are any issues with it, if you would just talk to your group leader about it, and we can have another discussion about whether or not that should be changed going forward.
I would have thought that if there are areas where individual members have particular questions, that they could cause a question to be asked and cause a paper to be written.
Well, it's a question of whether members want to go back to information items at committees or not. I'm happy to bring that to the next group leaders meeting and on Councillor Rogers' behalf.
Now, I think I'm saying something. I think I'm saying something different, Fiona. If we leave the situation as it is, information items are not, and I have some sympathy with what Councillor Rogers has said. But putting that on one side, if Councillor Rogers has queries about whatever, raise specific questions and ask for a paper.
Absolutely,
then we've got decisions being made.
Yes. I mean, the aim behind it was to try and streamline virtual meetings as much as possible.
I understand that.
Clearly, that was the purpose. Yeah.
I mean, this meeting has every chance of being finished in an hour and a half, which is unprecedented.
Exactly.
Councillor
Some might think that was a good thing, some might not.
Okay, anybody else? Right, I've got a number of things I want to pick up. First of all, to give the writers of the report every approval, because they used a word that I'd never come across, which was probative, and I had to look up. So well done, one to you, none to me. Secondly, what is the situation in terms of resources, in that, as I understand it, you are effectively 2 people down against a workload which is certainly not decreasing, Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. We're still addressing resource issues, and we do have 1 or 2 posts that are still vacant within what I describe, as a shared service manager, what I describe as the Cambridge establishment, which isn't necessarily staff who are engaged on Cambridgeshire County Council's audit plan, but as the committee will know, across the audit shared service, we have staff working for a number of councils who are employed by one of the 3 LGSS councils, being Milton Keynes, Cambridgeshire and Northants. So some of those resources within the Cambridgeshire structure aren't necessarily applied to Cambridgeshire's work. We do still have 1 or 2 vacancies in that area. But we are confident that those redeployments that we applied at the beginning of COVID, they've now returned into audit. We now have a full complement of staff to apply to the Cambridgeshire plan. And indeed, we recently still recruited 2 individuals through the trainee process. And that has given us a significant challenge in attempting to induct and train new entrants into audit during a period where we're not allowed to physically meet. So some of the virtual training and some of the virtual mentoring that we've had to apply have been quite challenging for us. And I think that should give you the reassurance that as we move towards the second 6 months, we do actually have a sufficient resource in order to deliver the planned work for Cambridgeshire. Within the report, I talk about we are now stopping the daily transactional audits on all the finances, and we are moving back towards a planned schedule of audit for the second half of the year. And I think the resourcing we have is sufficient to be able to deliver that for year end, assuming none of those audits trip over a significant control issue, which is the caveat we always give to every audit plan.
Right. 331 daily spend, there's the accounts payable section. Weekly reports were produced, summarized, blah, 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 work ceased. Are you confident that, well, you say you're planning additional work in this area to specifically focus on payments to suppliers in excess of 20K. Could you just comment on that?
That's a combination of a few things that we're intending to put into the draft plan for the second 6 months. And I should say within the report, we say somewhere, I forget which paragraph it is, that draft plan is going to come back to the committee at its October meeting. So you'll see the detail of that. But in a number of ways, we want to focus on payments to suppliers in excess of 20k. The national guidance on procurement still applies to some extent. So those contract payments to suppliers, we still need to take account of, are they still applying the national guidance, and is there good risk management going on around those contracts with the suppliers? Are we making an assessment of bankruptcy or insolvency for those suppliers? Of course, the payments we make to those suppliers are in fact designed to continue their revenues, to decrease the risk of any bankruptcy of a council supplier, so that when and if services come back online, that they're still in a healthy place to be able to continue those services. That's one of the objectives, is actually to ensure that when services come back online, that those suppliers are still able to deliver for them. And that also takes us to a place a little bit wider, that some services may not be impacted by COVID issues. Those services may well have continued largely unaffected. I'm thinking an example might be refuse collection or refuse disposal. Those services have continued, and we've continued payments for those. So in those senses, we also want to look at contract management across some of the larger contracts of the council as a slightly focused area, because that blurs the line between the procurement as it's affected by COVID issues and how we are contract managing within that changing volatile environment of in and out of lockdown.
Okay.
So that's how that reflects. It's less a service area focus, and we do want to be thinking a little bit more about contract management and how those suppliers' payments are being managed by services.
Right. Well, in context of procurement, on 335, you say the final report. This is on procurement waivers. You say the final report is expected to be issued by the 4th of September. Has it?
I'm going to have to confess ignorance and reply to the committee. I shall find out. As you complimented me earlier of my period of leave, it should have been issued just as I went on leave. So let me go back and double check, but I expected that to be issued, and I will confirm or otherwise that separately to committee members.
That's lovely, thank you. And then there was we were sending letters, is it to Shanks? I'm desperately trying to find my notes here. Oh, Skanska. 344. In early September 2000, the Executive Director, Place and Economy, sent a letter to Skanska and in clear terms set out the Council's expectations. This is Highways Contract OBR. This is actual cost information provided to the Council by the contractor in March, resulting in significant repayment to the Council. The exercise resulted in numerous meetings, etc. Despite numerous reminders to the contractor, this has not been forthcoming in early September, etc. Do we know if there's been a response?
I again have to defer.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I quite understand.
To find out. I know that work is ongoing and is not yet resolved or concluded.
Right.
But I can get a specific briefing note on that for you, Chair.
Thank you. There's a reference to recommendations that haven't been actioned and have been actioned and so on. And some of that was placed a bit on the back burner, quite understandably, given pressures of work. When do we expect to be back in control of those?
You highlight actually that September is a period where we as a team have identified that what we want to do is to go into each of those service areas that had a historically outstanding recommendation. Now, normally we would go into that area for an update on has that been implemented yet. What we have to do in the light of COVID is recognize that actually some of those recommendations may now be redundant.
Yes.
they now be not necessary.
Yes, absolutely.
So we need to go into those services and examine each of those cases on its merits with the service, and either identify, have they been implemented? Great, tick. If they've not been implemented, they might now be redundant and we want to draw a line through them.
Are they still covered? Yeah.
Or do we need to agree a different implementation because perhaps COVID has prevented their earlier implementation? There is a further category actually that I do want to highlight, that actually COVID might have reinforced the need for the implementation of that control improvement. So they might be more important to have implemented, but we need to have one-to-one conversations on each recommendation with the service, and we're doing that through September, and I hope to have a revised schedule of those recommendations for the October meeting.
Right. My final comment, I believe, is that I entirely understand that COVID has necessarily changed priorities in the work plan. We had a work plan agreed in March, or agreed for this year. What I would quite like to see in a fairly early timescale is what items have been removed or not dealt with as you would have expected or hoped at that time, so that we know what we're missing.
Okay, Chair. Could we have a conversation outside the meeting?
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Duncan, you know that.
Because the simple answer is yes, of course you can. If you want it, we will go through that process. I think there's a couple of bear traps in just going into the original plan and giving a long commentary of what was in there and we haven't covered, because some of it we will have covered through an alternative route. So I think a more detailed conversation with you outside the meeting to understand exactly what you want so that I get that right is needed.
No trouble. I look forward to that. I've run out of things to delay you all. Has anybody else got any reason why we should not all go our separate ways? Going once? Going twice?
Do we have the agenda plan?
Oh, sorry. Well done, Terry.
Leave me to it.
I would say the agenda plan is as set out, obviously still subject at the moment to the decisions of group leaders on what reports would come forward, but the next meeting is on the 30th of October, and as you can see, that is going to be the main meeting hopefully for the accounts reports, and also, as Duncan has indicated, there will be the audit plan report as well. Obviously all those are for decision. Meeting after that is set out on the November meeting, some of which, if we're still with the virtual meetings policy protocol, then some of them might still be taken outside of the meeting.
Okay. Well, I want to give particular thanks to Dan Snowden, who's sorted me out, because I'm down in Dorset and communications have not been easy. Bless him, he sorted me out. And other than that, I wish you all a safe journey home.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman.